Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing series where we are writing a comprehensive narrative D&D adventure from start to finish in real time right here on our YouTube channel. And so if you're just joining us for the very first time, we are continuing the adventure that we brainstormed in part one, in which our characters are hired by a community leader from Sky Song Gulch to recover the only known deposit of our MacGuffin, a material known as cold iron, which was lost in a glacial mine that we are calling the Berg, that was once ravaged by disease and is now abandoned. The community needs it to save themselves from the foretold coming of the Bloodgood Sisters Hag Coven, and they've led the adventurers to believe that the village plans on using the cold iron to fight these powerful fae. However, when they return with the cold iron, the adventurers learn that really the village is planning to pay off the hags with it, thus completing an ancient pact. The party then has to decide whether or not they're going to support empowering this coven with this powerful, face slaying cold iron, or convince the community to rise up and fight back, knowing that there's going to be consequences no matter what they choose. So, last time we were focusing on a few odds and ends. We had kind of finished fleshing out the basics of our setback, that transitional period between leaving Sky Song Gulch and moving to the Berg that takes the characters through a blistering hot desert rife with undead. And so we had built out kind of the mechanics of the actual travel and the persistent setback that puts the characters potentially in a nasty spot when they arrive at the adventure location. On I think we did that on part 10, and now part 11 we talked a little bit about building out the oasis, which is kind of a middle point and a place of respite that the adventurers might be able to find throughout this adventure, giving them perhaps an easier time getting through the travel section of this, adding a little more narrative feel to the travel, and giving them some treasure, a little boon if they find it. Then we moved over to the Berg, and we had previously filled out a number of the key areas here, with the overall kind of puzzle of this, or the discovery phase of our five scene, five moment, five room, whatever you want to call it, adventure setting here. Um, by filling out where they're going to find these three keys, they need to access the cold iron storage, since it's a very precious material, and what sort of challenges they're going to have to overcome to get those keys. And so last time we were filling in a few of the details, and we were doing a couple quick encounters in here that filled out some of the rooms here and didn't necessarily, uh, we'll say, advance the story, but were more challenges or rewards or setbacks that the characters might find while exploring this place. And there's still plenty of that kind of stuff to fill in here. Um, but to be completely honest with you, other than needing to draw out a map for the Berg, we could theoretically run this section of the adventure as is, filling in the gaps in improvisationally as we go. Now, I'm not going to leave it like this. We're going to come back to it and fill it out and make it polished as we go through this. But we wouldn't have to if we were writing this for ourselves. There's a few things we might want to fill out, coming back to this font of magic idea and how magic is affected here. I really like that. I really want to do something with that. But I don't want to spend today on that. Right now, I want to spend today working on one of the big elements here that we really haven't done much with, and that's our climax to the adventure. What in a five-room dungeon setting would be known as our big bad evil guy, our BBEG encounter. Um, and in many adventure arcs, this is going to be the all or nothing fight with the big villain. And in this case, there's going to be an element of that, potentially. It really is going to be up to our characters. As we mentioned, they have a choice that they have to make here. They either have to uh, kind of go along to get along and support the town, empowering the Bloodgood sisters, and then dealing with the consequences of that, or they have to stand and fight, and either doing that on their own or with the support of the town. And so I want to flesh out a little bit of this. Um, but before we do, I think I would like to talk a little bit about the actual confrontation. And I have here the confrontation with the Bloodgood sister. If you'll recall, we filled this out, gosh, really early in this series. Um, and I and we did that because, well, the coven is always three hags. Um, the three hags with coven rules is a little overpowered for our third level adventurers. And we want to make sure that this is an encounter that the party can win. It should be difficult. There should be the threat of death, but it has to be winnable. If it's not winnable, then it gets railroady, right? Because then it doesn't matter what the characters do. They There's only one outcome, and that removes all player agency, which in my mind is the number one no. It is the one inviolable rule of tabletop role playing games and D&D specifically, is that player choice has to matter no matter what you do. So let's start with the easy bit here, and let's talk about balancing this encounter. So I think it's reasonable that the Bloodgood sisters would not send, they would not all come together. They wouldn't come in force to this little town that they have effectively subjugated through their machinations. As you'll probably recall if you've been watching the series, we decided that the Bloodgood sisters had long ago dammed up the water supply to the people of Skysong Gulch, unbeknownst to them, and then came to the rescue of the village, or the town. I guess it's technically a town based on its size. Came to the rescue of the town by offering them, the magic solution they needed to get the water flowing again. Really, they just kind of undammed their own dam, right? So they created a problem, they solved it, and now they're demanding payment with this cold iron for that solution. And so I think it's not unreasonable for them to believe that they've really kind of outfoxed the village here, and that there's no reason to come in force. You just send one, likely their weakest sister, which also gives us a cool narrative opportunity later on, because if we only have one sister that the characters, you know, likely confront, because let's be honest, they're likely going to stand and fight in some capacity. They're unlikely to just be like, "Man, well, that's the town's problem," because that's not as fun for the players. It's much more fun to get in and mix it up and try to do something, as opposed to just sit back and let things happen. So, if we have them confronting one sister, ultimately defeating said sister, then it means that two other sisters are remaining. So even if they, wipe out and destroy the first Bloodgood sister, there's two more of them, and now the characters are on these hags' radar, which means that now we've got an enemy that will come back, and this gives us villains for later adventures, especially if we're writing this as kind of the beginning of a campaign. Maybe we're starting our campaign at level 3, or we're starting a larger arc here. It's good to lay some track for things that could happen in the future, even if we don't know what those things are yet. Just like we made a place at the Oasis for a potential social encounter, a pointer character, or an adventure hook for something else going forward. So let's talk a little bit about this. I took the liberty of getting a little bit prepared here by going ahead and tossing some filters on our D&D Beyond encounter builder here. And one, looking up hags. Two, I put some limitations on the resources that I used here. You don't have to use whatever resources you like, especially if you're making the game for yourself. Um, my ultimate goal with this adventure is I'd like to publish it at the end of this so that all of you who have been following along can kind of see what the final product looks like and take this and play it in your own tables. But in the meant, so so for that, I've limited myself to the basic rules of Monster Manual and Mordenkainen's, not Tome Foes, but Mordenkainen presents Monsters of Multi-Universe, Monsters of the Multiverse. Should be this. So because I don't want you to have too many resources. Anyway, I digress. I get on a tangent here. So, but I've gone ahead and I've set this up for. Let's move it over so you can kind of see that here. Um, a little hard to see. Let's move the screen over just a touch so you can see what I'm talking about, and then we'll move it back. The I've set it up for 4 characters here and level 3 characters because that's what we've balanced this adventure for. All right, let's move this back so we'll be able to read everything in our Notion tab when we get back there. Put in Hag here in the search bar, limited my resources, and this is what's come up. Now, immediately, this is going to reveal to us that we are kind of limited in some of our options here, right? Like a sea hag is going to be too soft, especially without significant backup. Green hag is going to be a little bit weak here. The sea hag coven variant is a little closer to kind of what we'd be looking for. And everything else is just a little too much for this point in the party. And so this might be a moment where we go, oh, no, what do? We've kind of, boxed ourselves in here. Do we have to go through and rewrite all this to come up with bigger baddies? Do we have to create a hag from scratch? No, we're going to take one of these and we're going to modify it, soup it up a little bit, and we're going to give it some minions. Because while they might come alone, in terms of not bringing another one of the sisters with them, they're unlikely to come unprotected. The Sea Hag variant, Coven variant here doesn't really work for us, rules as written, because the Coven variation requires the sisters are physically present together to cast these. And also coming at 3rd level characters with 6th level spells is, it can be a recipe for a TPK. So we don't want to do that. Instead, I think having our youngest, our weakest sister of the group be a green hag here gives us a good place to start. One, it gives us a little bit of magic right out the gate that we can use. But also we can add to her. We can give her magic items. We can give her legendary actions. And we can make her a beefier, stronger evil here. And then, of course, we can give her minions, which ultimately is a really good idea. One thing that I really try to avoid in boss fights is the party coming up against a singular monster. Because while that feels, in some cases, very narrative, we think of myths where, people, where our hero battles the Medusa or fights the dragon or the Hydra, and it's just this one thing they have to defeat. Mechanically, the action economy makes that battle very one-sided, right? Because if we throw, a dragon at the party, yes, they've got a lot of hit points. Yes, they can do a lot of damage with their hits, and they can be a real challenge, but they get one action to the party's, 4 actions every turn. So unless we give them just a lot of extra stuff they can do in a turn, which is an option, they get overwhelmed just by the action economy of the game. So one solution to that is to add legendary actions to give them more actions that they can do every turn so that we balance out that action economy and make it a little more even. The other thing is to add minions, which then add more actions to the side of the villain, and thus, again, balancing out that action economy. And to make this a more difficult fight, we want to make sure that there's more actions per round on the villain side, as opposed to less, because that's going to tip the balance in favor of the villains and make things more challenging for our characters. We don't want to get too wild with that. We're going to talk about how we're going to balance that in a little bit here. So one thing I'm going to do to just kind of double check myself on this is we're going to come up to our trusty Xanathar's Guide. And if you haven't noticed yet, I really like the encounter builder stuff in here. We're going to come down here. And so our green hag is a level 3. And yeah, that kind of balances with a solo monster challenge rating for 4th level characters. But if we read the fine print, it says to match them up with a legendary creature. And so the idea here is that this is for one legendary creature. Legendary creatures have multiple actions they can take per round. So it matches up our idea here that we need to give her a little bit something extra that she can do. And this also makes for a medium kind of difficulty encounter. We want to dial this up a little bit by adding a little bit more meat to this. So let's come over here and let's pick a sister to work with, shall we? So we've got Mayra Bloodgood, who uses kind of sickly sweet terms. She dresses over the top in somewhat gruesome clothing. There's a strict hierarchy to life, is her misbelief. That might be a good choice. Ultimately, I'm not sure it matters which sister we decide is the weakest. But I like to do a read through here and see who's the one that I feel the strongest about role playing. And frankly, I want to hold them off. I want to make them my biggest villain when I'm in a situation like this, because there's more opportunity for the characters to interact with her, over the course of several adventures. Let's see. Ferrex's misbelief. Only the most powerful magic users can ever be my equal. That's potentially a good one. Briar. Requires us to... Let's see here. Yeah, I think let's do Briar. She's got a little more of a careless kind of feel to her. She's more about balance. And so she's more of a neutral entity here, as opposed to the savage, power-hungry kind of vibes her sisters can give. And talking about Mayra, has got a strict hierarchy to life. She needs to dominate those around her. Whereas Ferrex needs that absolute freedom. She wants to be the most powerful magic user. There's something unbalanced about their characters in terms of their wants. They need to be at the top, whereas Briar is a little less driven for domination. She's more out for vengeance. Yeah, so she's a little bit of a lighter of a character. And even if we kill her off in this, she's a hag, she's a fae. Maybe she comes back. She can find a way. Life and death aren't as rigid for her. They might be permeable. So let's start with her. Let's do Briar, and we're gonna make her a green hag. Let's come over here and just go ahead and get to our details page so we can link that nice and easy here. Okay. I always do that. Hyperlink right there. Cool. All right. So, but she is going to be a little bit of a custom stat block here. So we want to give her some legendary actions. Now you can do that kind of one of two ways. We could build it out right here in the confrontation with the Bloodgood sister, but I think that putting stat block stuff there gets a little cumbersome, makes it harder to find. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to build her out by saying, by building our own stat block for this. So legendary green hag. Cool. So let's go ahead and open that up, and we're going to use the monster stat block builder here. And this will end up being her stat block. Now, you can go through and kind of copy all this down and literally just kind of copy and paste what you need to in this. But I'm going to focus on the legendary action aspect here to start when I'm working on her. And this, I will admit to you, is a little easier if we kind of split our screens here. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to do a little more jumping back and forth to kind of make this a little clearer on the screen. So let's go ahead and, ooh, what level is that? It's heading 2. Okay, cool. So let's add a legendary actions block to this. That's what a divider. Cool. Put that there. All right. So legendary actions can affect the action economy here. And they would do a couple things. And how to frame this? When you're writing legendary actions, most creatures you'll find if you kind of read through, they get 3 legendary actions, per turn, or 3 legendary action points, or what have you. And different actions will use up different amounts of those points. And there is not like a hard and fast way to balance that. So what I tend to do, or to determine what should be 1 point, what's 2, what's 3 points. So what I do instead is that when I'm adding legendary actions here to give them a little bit more combat power, I go to the Dungeon Master's Guide. I go to Chapter 9, the Creating a Monster section. Then I kind of come down to this table here, the monster statistics by challenge rating. And this is going to give me some rough terms for how much damage they should do in a round. Okay, and so now there's rules lower down about how you use this table when things are a little bit offset. And for the sake of not just like republishing IP here, I'm gonna talk about those, but I'm not gonna like get into the text itself. But leave you to read that for yourself. But effectively, I know that for her to be about a challenge rating 3, which is perhaps not quite what I want. Maybe we want her a little bit closer to a 4, based off of our encounter builder here, right? Like we said again that our Sea Hag Coven variant with a challenge rating 4 is a little bit closer to what we want, but a 5 might be a little too much, especially if we're giving her some minions. Maybe it isn't if we decide not to give her minions at all. We'll see. But that gives us kind of a ballpark to work with here. So we know 4, we're looking at 27 to 32 damage. 5, we're looking at 33 to 38. Plus 5, plus 6 to hit. Armor class 14, 15, and some hit point ranges here. So what we can do is if we go over to her and we look at her stat block here, then we know that we're looking at 82 hit points, which probably puts her a little bit low on the hit point spectrum there. And she's going to get 1 attack that's going to do damage. Now, she could do Vicious Mockery, and that does a little less damage. So when we're doing this, we kind of want to look at what's her optimal. Well, the argument is what's the optimal attack for her to do every round. That maybe limits your options. So sometimes if she's got multiple damaging, I might go with whatever the middle ground is. So sometimes she can hit a little harder, sometimes she can hit a little lower, and it balances. But for this, we've only got 2 options: Vicious Mockery and her claws. So let's go with the claws. On average, they're going to do 13 points of damage a round, right? So she's got 82 hit points, a plus 6 to hit. So let's kind of see where she, where it looks like she balances from the get-go. So 82 hit points would put her at challenge rating 1. Oh, we didn't check her armor class. 17 armor class. Okay, that makes her extra beefy. So we would put her at a challenge rating 1 for the hit points at 82, and 17 would make her a 10. And functionally, what you do here is that for every 2 spaces of difference here, you raise the expected challenge rating by 1, right? Like, so we're going from 1 to 2, 1 to 10, so that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? 9 divided by 2, rounded down, is 4. So we're going to bump this up by 4. So hit points wise, hit points armor class, we'd expect her to be kind of a 5 here, right? So that's a little higher. That's a little bit closer to what we're kind of targeting. So that might be good. Might be able to leave the AC and the hit points kind of untouched, right? Whereas for our damage, we're talking 13 points of damage. So again, that puts her at 1. And we said what? She's got a +6 to hit. It's not bad. So we're going to say a 1, and that +6 brings us here. It's the same kind of deal, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to bump this up by 2. It gives us to a 3. Interesting. Interesting. And then we would average those challenge ratings and say that actually suggests that she's closer to a 4, which is good, but it still affects her action economy. It still doesn't help our action economy here. So let's add some attacks here. Maybe we say that one of them is an additional claw attack. So let's see here. Legendary green hag has 3 legendary actions per turn, and which she can take immediately following another creature's turn. Or it's 3 actions per round rather, not per turn. Round. She cannot use the same legendary action twice in a row. Cool. So let's give her some legendary actions, and let's say, claw attack. What did they call it here? They called it claws. Okay, plural. Claws. Boom. The hag makes an additional claw attack. And we would note that that's what? 1 action. Cool. All right, so that's going to give her 1 additional action that's going to bump her damage output by 13. So it takes her from here to, what, 23? So it's going to put her closer to that there. That +6. Yeah, so that means that she's getting closer to that 4 right there. So that's pretty good. So that's going to help bump her up just a touch. Closer again to that 4 that we're kind of targeting. Yeah, so that means that other legendary actions we can give her don't have to be damaging. That being said, she's a hag, right? We want some spells. We want some magic in here. We don't just want this to be, we don't just want this to be a, straight kind of slash and, she's a witch, but she only ever uses her claws. We want her to be able to do some other things in here that make her feel like a truly magical opponent. So let's see what else she can do. So she's got the illusory appearance, which I don't know is really a combat-y kind of thing. Invisible passage. The miniature is visible until she attacks against her other until her concentration ends. While invisible, she leaves no. See, that could be useful too. So let's make that another action. And let's say passage. One action. The hag uses her visible passage action. Cool. So those are cool. Two things from there, pretty easy to fill in, nice and simple. Doesn't muck about with her too much, and keeps her damage output, relatively close to where we want it. What we might be able to do, so we got 26s we're kind of looking at over here. Puts us here. Yeah, so that puts us kind of at the top of that range. But 4 is kind of what we're targeting, and it doesn't affect us much to do a little more damage if our plus 6 to hit stays the same. Meanwhile, her spell DC is 12. Spell save DC is 12. And we've got spells like Vicious Mockery. So what does that hit? Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be... Vicious Mockery is going to do a 1d4. Yeah, so it's pretty low. Let us... we could do something simple here, and there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, she is gonna, she can use one of her legendary actions to cast one of her at-will spells. That would not mess up her action economy too much here, right? Because yes, it would do a little bit of damage, a little bit of extra damage per turn. But we could beef it up a little bit if we want to do. Or we could do something that we could give her an extra spell that makes her a little more challenging without necessarily adding to her damage output. So these are all cantrip level spells, right? We could do something simple. We could say that she has, she could do cure wounds on herself as a legendary action. We could, because we could skin that too, because we can skin some of these as like they're not necessarily inherent traits. She's using the weird magic things that she's made, the potions that she's conjured, all that kind of stuff. And so it could be a simple mechanic for, instead of being like she has 1,000,000 health potions, instead she's got the ability to kind of give herself a little bit of buff on heals, which might be very useful here. So instead of adding to the damage, which is about where we want it per round for her, we can instead go ahead and give her some ability to keep herself in the game if she gets hit, right? Because the players could get lucky. They could be rolling high and doing lots of damage, and we don't want this to be just an overwhelm on their part. And right now we got 4 characters, and she's taking really just 2 attacks per round. So we're gonna add some minions in here to kind of level that out, but we don't want her to be in a place where she's just taken over on the first round, ideally. So let's say, let's call this Let's call this healing. Let's call this healing brew. 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 Healing bre Healing Brew. Um, and let's say one action. Okay. The hag casts cure wounds. On herself. So we've got that. That's good. That'll help keep her in. One thing that I'm kind of thinking about here is this claw attack. She doesn't have any ranged attacks, um, and I think that that's a poor tactic for a hack, right? Because they are not going to be close combat tanky brawlers, right? She doesn't want to stay in the fray. She wants to put a screen of minions in front of her or magic and stay at a distance here. So I think one of the things maybe we want to do for this is get rid of her claw attack and instead reskin it as a magical attack that could be both melee or ranged. And that way it gives her a little bit of flexibility here tactically. It doesn't make her useless if she stands back, which I'm not sure why a hag would ever want to get into you know into fisticuffs with a paladin or what have you, right? So let's mess about with that. So we don't need to really kind of change the damage output or the to hit here. Um, so we can use kind of all these same sort of stats. We just want to change it just a little bit. So let's copy that. Let's come over here and let's say, let's call it something, I don't know, something creepy like Withering Grasp. And we'll say it's a melee or ranged spell attack. And we'll still give it, yeah, we'll copy and paste what we have there, get rid of that. And we'll say still a +6 to hit. That's good. We're going to say 5-foot reach, or we'll say, what's the range on Vicious Mockery? 60 feet? Cool. 60 feet for this. Why not? Or 60-foot range. One target, 13 to hit, 2d8 +4. And because that +4 comes from her strength, we don't need to mess with that. Don't have to justify where our pluses come always. Charisma, we could say, let's call it necrotic damage. So by just reskinning the damage here and the actual attack, we give her a little more versatility without changing the balance of her. And maybe we, bump up her charisma a little bit. It's not affecting much in the rest of her, other than it'll change her spell save DC, but it'll take it from a 12 to a 14, which frankly is a little more reasonable for what we're going for here. So yeah, and so we're going to change this from claws to Withering Grasp again. Copy. Put that there. Okay, cool. So now we have a challenge rating 4-ish monster. And getting back to our counter build, the nice thing about this is it's just going off a challenge rating. It's not taking into account any of the abilities. So we can just pop that in there to get that feel, and then we can see what makes this deadly. Well, let's let's see what we're kind of working with here. We probably want somewhere along the lines of, a 1 and 4 to, or 1/4 to, maybe a 1 or 1/2. Kind of see what we've got and see thematically what she might bring with her. Now, this is where if we go back to her personality, we might have a better idea of what. It was Briar, right? That's what we're doing? Yeah. We need to change that now. Legendary Green Hag. And link that bad boy. Nice thing is that if it's built in Notion, I don't have to know the URL. I can just link it. So let's see here. She's constantly fidgeting, picking with things. She gives no thought to her appearance or dress. Frequently gowned in a little more than a sackcloth. So what kind of things thematically might work for her? I could see mephits, maybe. Mephits? Let's see. Yeah, so maybe some mud or dust mephits. I like mephits because they explode when you kill them, and they have little breath weapons, and so they kind of, in some ways, I think they punch above their weight. So let's see. If we do like mud methods, yeah, we can give her 2 of those and make it a deadly encounter for this level, which is what it should be. I firmly believe at uh, at the climax encounter, like it should be a question of life and death. Um, and this gives us an easy way to kind of, play with that balance a little bit, especially when it comes time to figure out how convincing the town to support them benefits the characters, right? Because there should be a tangible benefit to them for putting all that work in and figuring that out. And maybe it's that it wipes out the threat of the methods. So maybe there's more of them to start, and we make this an even more difficult encounter. Because we give her kind of 2 damaging actions here per round, and we're giving them, they've each got a damaging action, 4 characters that levels out this. But maybe, if maybe she comes with 4 of them, and the townspeople can take care of 2 when we get there. So that's going to come out to, let's see how that, it's going to come out as deadly. But it's not that much worse on the XP there. It multiplies it because of the action economy there. And then Xanathar's, let's take a look. And, we're looking at 3rd level. Yeah, it's going to be hard anyway. But Unmephits, there's 2 to 1. So, yeah, 4 of them plus a 4th level monster. Yeah, it's going to be a particularly tough encounter there. But I don't think too tough, especially if they could get a boon of eliminating some of those threats. So let's go ahead, come over here, and we're going to make a note to ourselves here so we don't forget before next time. And we're going to say Briar Bloodgood arrives with 4 mud mephits. And let's go ahead and get that URL, copy that. And no, I realize Grammarly that you do not recognize what a mephit is, but it's okay. And mephits. To collect the cold iron. So we've got that here. Okay, so the combat itself is pretty straightforward. Sometimes I'll like think of tactics as I'm kind of building this up. Oh, it would be cool if, you know, she, used her invisibility every round to, attack, turn invisible, you know, pop up somewhere and attack, or attack, tack, turn invisible. And so we might add a little tactics section to ourselves here if we want. Let's say tactics. Briar uses her invisible. I think it was invisible passage. I'm not going to waste the time to go back and look. Action or legendary action. Action to turn visible each round. Turn invisible each round, and to turn invisible each round and avoid damage or detection. That gives her a little bit more mobility. It allows her to kind of pop around, and keeps the players on their toes. It really incentivizes them to rouse the town. Especially the town can help with the mephits and reduce the possibility of damage here. So let's see here. We'll make it again a little note to ourselves here. We're getting closer to the end of our time, so let's put just the bare details of what we thought about here. So let's say if the characters are successful in rousing the people of Sky Song Gulch against the hags, it's the Bloodgood Sisters. The town's people engage say 2 question mark of the mud mephits, neutralizing them as a threat to the characters. So that's kind of a static way to do this, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, thinking about a group of commoners, arming themselves with makeshift weapons and armor, and then taking on 2 elemental creatures that breathe mud and explode. Um, is not too far fetched, right? But we might make it more dynamic. Narratively, we could make it incredibly dynamic. In the case of, oh, we could have her summoning mud mephits. Maybe that's, instead of healing, maybe that's her. Hmm. Yeah, maybe that is something that might be a legendary action for her instead. And we make that, I kind of like that better thematically. Although we don't have to limit ourselves. We could have them both in there, Nothing wrong with giving yourself a few extra tools here, especially when you're running this and you're not writing this for other people. When I get to the point where we're editing this, I might take some time and spend a little more time balancing this. But since we're just running it for ourselves, let's add that in here, right? Let's say summon mephit. And let's make that adds a whole new action to the economy. But 3 seems a little much. So let's make that 2 actions. And again, some of this you're just kind of guessing and going for it and realizing that when you run it, you may have to dial it back a little bit. or ramp it up a touch. There's nothing wrong with massaging encounters in combat. Um, and to that end, I tend to make my encounters a little bit tougher than they perhaps need to be, because I find it easier to dial back the difficulty than ramp it up without making the players feel like they've been cheated in some way, right? Um, because it's easier for me to have a villain make a suboptimal decision than it is to suddenly go, oh crap, they're down to 1 hit point. It's only been 2 rounds. Uh, well, she's actually her maximum hit point's actually higher. Not that they'll necessarily notice that, but it feels more like you're playing catch up to me than the other way around. That's my personal preference. You can do it any way you like, but that's just kind of my thought process on that. So let's say summon Mephit, and they're what? 1 and 4. Okay, cool. So we'll say. Oh, I already did that. Let's hear the hag summons 1 Mephit of any variety. Let's say of challenge rating 1/4. Okay. The Mephit acts on its own initiative, but obeys all commands from the hag. Cool. Give ourselves that little note. And yeah, I like that. I like that. And two, we could have specified Mud Method here, but this gives us the ability to kind of use this same stat block for some other hag encounter if we want. Although we'll probably use some beefier stat blocks for, Mayra and Ferrex as we work through this. So, yeah, I like that. So, what that could mean then is that instead of, let's see, the townspeople engage, let's say engage the mud methods. Let's say engage 2 mud methods at a time. 2 mud methods at a time, neutralizing them as a threat to the characters, which makes this just a little bit more dynamic. So she comes in, they immediately take 2 of them, which knocks this down. She can summon more of them, but then the townsfolk are still kind of handling them. So we should probably figure out how long it takes the townsfolk to destroy them. And to do that, let's just take a quick look at the commoner stat block. I want to say they do like 4 damage around, but let's see. Commoner. Okay, 2 damage theoretically is what they're kind of doing. So we don't need to worry about their hit. We don't need to put them in the combat tracker and roll for them or anything like that. We can just say, okay, they're going to do about 2 damage around. There's a horde of them, and then the mud methods have a relatively low AC and a few hit points. So let's say that they destroy 2 mud methods. Let's see, destroying them. Destroying them in 2 rounds. Say 2 rounds. Yeah, so they effectively destroy a Muffet, 1 mud Muffet. Yeah, they just effectively destroy 1 mud Muffet a round. So so they wipe out 2, and they wipe out 2 more every round as we continue on, which I think makes this a little more balanced, and it puts in a position where yes, it's still a challenging encounter against Briar Bloodgood, which is good. We don't want this to turn into a weak kind of anticlimactic encounter. Instead, it keeps the encounter challenging, but it helps limit Bloodgood's options, right? Briar either is going to have to spend, two actions, two legendary actions every round summoning a new method to keep up the numbers, or the the people of Sky Sun Gulch are going to wipe out her methods, making her a much more vulnerable character. So I think that's a pretty beefy boon for convincing the town to join them. We'll strip out the mechanics here, or we'll build out the mechanics, I should say. I think next time, what it takes to convince the village, because they shouldn't, since this is such a hefty boon for this. This should be something that they that takes a little bit of doing. It shouldn't come down, I think, to a simple, we talked to one guy and he was like, I speak for everyone. We'll all join you. I think it needs to be a little more involved in that. Not necessarily a skill challenge per se, but there should be a little bit of work that goes into this. And then fighting on their own is pretty straightforward. Uh, they face Briar as is. Let's see here. Characters stand alone against Briar Bloodgood and her minions. The interesting thing here that I want to think about for next time, as we're kind of talking about this, is what happens if they fail to rouse the town. Because I can imagine a scene, right, where the players go, we're going to get the town all riled up, and we're all going to stand against Briar Bloodgood. And then they fail to do it. And now the townspeople are frightened that their the characters are gonna kind of put their foot in it, right? They're gonna mess it all up, and the hags are gonna be angry, and they're gonna take it out on the town, and so maybe they would take steps to. Oh yeah, and then maybe they would take steps to hinder the party. So maybe that's the gamble of trying to rouse the town against the hags. So let's make a note here. If the characters are unsuccessful, town, say, the town's people become frightened. They'll rouse the anger of the Bloodgood sisters and take steps to hinder the characters. And then we'll say whatever those steps are is TBD. Okay. Cool. I like that. I like where that's going. We've got a nice little carrot if they succeed, and a potential, wallop if they fail, and then two more neutral options that they could take. So I think we're going to go ahead and put a pin in that there. So thank you so much for joining me for part 12 of the of Let's Write an Adventure. So we'll continue this next week, and I think that's the 25th of May if you're watching this in real time. And we'll continue building out this section. I think we'll work some more on really fleshing out the confrontation here and the climax, and how all that works. In the meantime, if you've been enjoying the series or any of my videos, please like and subscribe to this video. It really helps the channel grow, helps me do more of these on a regular basis. If you want to see a full-blown adventure that I have written using the same set of tools and have polished and put up on the DM's Guild, check out Plague Breakers in the links to this video. It's free, so no reason not to download it. Check it out and see what you think. If you like it, please leave a review. And if you want this adventure template, if you haven't already secured it, the links to get that template in Notion for free is again in this video. And then last but not least, a little shameless plug here. I did a thing, everybody. So I've talked on my channel before about taking session notes and how you remember everything that goes on in a campaign as an adventurer, as a DM. And so I created a handy little tool for that, now available on Amazon, but effectively it's a notebook, lets you take session notes in the Cornell note-taking style. And that fills up most of this 108-page book, but it also has sections later on to kind of organize some of that into specific notes on NPCs, quests, factions, downtime, and then it has a couple dot grid blank pages in the back for anything that doesn't fit anywhere else. Again, that is available on Amazon, and I will add that link in the description to this video here if you're interested in that. But anyway, whatever you do, thank you so much for joining and watching. You just being here makes this worthwhile for me. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you guys again on Saturday.